Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I hope everyone is having a very, very lovely day today. So I would like to start with my discussion of my favorite titles, my favorite releases from the Criterion collection during this year, 2019. So my favorite titles from 2019 from the Criterion collection. Let's start off with a discussion about upgrades. So let me begin by saying as a preliminary note that this list of what I describe as being upgrades, and I use air quotes around that, upgrades. I use the term broadly and loosely in my mind to describe a film that had once been in the Criterion collection, let's say as a DVD or as a Laserdisc, and then during the year of 2019, Criterion Collection decided to re-release that title with different packaging, maybe different supplements, and a whole new presentation and look, which gives it maybe a different outlook, as it were. So there were a number of films that were like that in the Criterion Collection. There were some titles that went from Laserdiscs to Blu-rays, from DVDs to Blu-rays. And oftentimes those DVDs or Laserdiscs, well, certainly in the case of Laserdiscs, but for the DVDs, they were out of print. And so this act of bringing these titles back, resurrecting them, is one way of putting it, of course. This act of bringing these titles back, I thought was really quite significant and remarkable, and I think it's well worth talking about. There were other films, of course, that were currently in the Criterion collection, but then were given, let's say, a Blu-ray release to cover, for instance, maybe a 2K restoration or 4K restoration of that particular film, which might differ from the already currently existing DVD in the Criterion collection. We saw a number of films like this already, but what I'd like to focus on are those films that we saw really almost an overhaul type of upgrade from an older format to the newer Blu-ray format with certain modifications, additions, or a complete renovation as to what the presentation was, or what the presentation is versus how it was in its prior incarnation. So without further ado, my friends, let me speak to you about this list. And this is going to be a top 5 favorites list for this particular category, which is my favorite upgrades. So here we go. So first is number 5, which is Spy number 988. So this was a Blu-ray that was released in the Criterion collection this year. This is The Inland Sea. This is the film that is directed by Lucille Cara, and it is covering the work, or it's an adaptation, if you will, or it's a re-expression, or a visual re-expression, if you will, of the work by the very famous Donald Ritchie. And this is given an extra added bonus for those who are fans of Donald Ritchie by including Donald Ritchie's own voice as being supplying the narration for this film. And it's, I think, Travelogue is not doing the film justice. It's a kind of meditation on the meaning of Japan from the perspective of an outsider. And I use that term because this is the term that both the director Kara and also Donald Ritchie himself, as shown in the supplements, seems to use in order to describe the position that Donald Ritchie finds himself in. Of course, he was very famous for his knowledge and his network of connections with various artists and filmmakers in Japan. He was very knowledgeable about Japanese cinema, Japanese theater, literature, but at the same time he was looking at it from his own perspective. And so I think the film and the concept of the inland sea, which is, I think, self-acknowledged by Ritchie himself, is a sort of meditation on Japan from the perspective of Ritchie himself, who is self-acknowledged to be a kind of quote-unquote outsider, although I believe that term outsider is a very nuanced and it's quite a loaded term, and it's one that I think is worth pondering if one is going to consider an in-depth consideration of this particular work, The Inland Sea. So that is to say that I think this film is a very unique work. This, I should be very clear here, this used to be a Laserdisc, which is right here. Specifically, this was a Voyager Company Laserdisc. Now, the Voyager Company and the Criterion Collection do have this history that goes back to the Laserdisc days here. So this particular title was released under the label of the Voyager Company. So it's not officially a Criterion Collection title, although, as I indicated, there are deep connections between the Criterion Collection and the Voyager Company. And so sometimes we see, even now, certain titles in the Criterion Collection catalog that used to be not Criterion Laserdiscs, but in fact Laserdiscs under the label of the Voyager Company. So now we have another example, the latest example being the film The Inland Sea, which, yes, used to be a Laserdisc, but this was a Voyager Company Laserdisc. So this is, I think, how should I put it? It is, I think, a film that I would say is one that I wouldn't necessarily put it at my very, very top number one favorite of all time. I do find it to be somewhat, how should I put it? Do have trouble sometimes engaging with it fully, because there are some moments where I think the narrations might be seen as being a little bit, I don't know if arrogant is the right term, but there is a certain perspective that is given towards the Japanese culture, which at first glance I might have been a little bit uncomfortable with. However, I think this aspect of the film is quite wholly acknowledged by the director herself, Lucille Cara, and she does so in this the interview that's given by her in the supplemental material. So I think that is a really welcome and refreshing take to have. And so that also helps me to better understand and appreciate the film, which, as I was trying to indicate from the outset here, is taken quite quite reasonably, and this is acknowledged as being such. It's taken from the quote-unquote outsider perspective. And so with that idea in place, and also with a firm understanding of Donald Ritchie's connections with Japan, as well as Lucille Cara's connections with Japan. She has a very extensive connection with Japan and with the Japanese film industry, which is incredibly enlightening. So if you haven't seen the supplement with her interview, I strongly suggest that you check it out, because she's such a fascinating character, and her history is really quite fascinating. One of the most interesting glimpses into a filmmaker that I've seen in some time. So, but knowing this perspective, the director Kara and of the subject Richie himself, then I think we can, at least I can, get a better appreciation of where he is coming from with his particular narration and his particular takes on what he perceives to be authentic Japanese and the authentic Japanese experience and that sort of thing. This is to say that while I think this is a film that, from my perspective, might not necessarily give me the feeling of having a full grand meal, so to speak, I do appreciate its efforts and I do appreciate where it's coming from. And that is, again, due in large part to the great supplements. These are really quite remarkable. So I'm very much thankful to the Criterion Collection for doing this. Once again, it's not my favorite film ever, but it is one that I can have a better appreciation of, given what I see of this film in connection with, or in conjunction with, the Criterion Collection supplements. So, with this, my friends, this is The Inland Sea. Number 4, and this is spine number 979. This is the Blu-ray of Swing Time. So the film Swing Time is, of course, the musical dance film starring Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire, and it is an intriguing work, a very interesting work, and it is incredibly interesting to watch, in particular in the context of today, 2019. Now we're closing in on 2020. So there is a very, on its surface, and also I think at its heart, there is a very tender and I think earnest story, a kind of love story or a romance comedy story that is punctuated by some breathtaking dance numbers and some charming and iconic songs that are performed with such wit and such liveliness and a real sense for the magic and marvel of the great entertainments of the early 20th century. So this is Swing Time, which is a kind of, on the one hand, it's a very lovely film to behold. On the other hand, of course, there are certain elements of the film that I think are quite interestingly problematic. Let me put it that way. Interestingly problematic when viewed through the contemporary lens of the modern-day filmgoer. And there's a particular dance number here which is referred to as the Bojangles of Harlem dance number that Fred Astaire performs, which I think is particularly quite problematic to watch, and it would be very interesting to see how modern day audiences reconcile this particular movie with the context that this particular dance number provides. I think it is possible to watch this film in terms of the historical perspective, given the time period that it was created and the social mores that were in existence at the time. But also we should acknowledge the fact that this kind of for lack of a better word, sort of unpleasantness in cinema does exist, and it really needs to be examined with a proper kind of sensitivity and acknowledgement, which is great about the Criterion Blu-ray here, because there is a particular supplement here that really goes at the heart of what this particular dance number is, what it represents, and its social and historical context. And so I recommend this Blu-ray for, if anything, that particular supplement which goes into the this idea of minstrel performances and also the dance numbers here, and whether or not there is something inherently problematic with this particular dance number that is included in this otherwise a very charming work of art, which is Swing Time. The reason why I make this explanation in the context of this particular element of the film is because this is sort of relevant to why it's sort of relevant to its status as an upgrade, if you will. This film, Swing Time, used to be in the Criterion collection as a Laserdisc, which is right here. Swing Time Laserdisc. This was Laserdisc number 6, and it was actually released many times. This is one particular version, and here is another particular version right here. The contents are identical to the earlier silver cover version that I just showed. And then here's another version, in fact, that's with a white cover. So there were, I think, as far as I know, 3 different releases on Criterion Laserdisc, 2 of which were known as special editions. Those special editions had a number of supplemental features, which I think were quite revolutionary given the time in which these Laserdiscs were released in the late 1980s. But one of the supplements that's included in the Laserdisc Swing Time is actually an excerpt from the film Hooray for Love, which is the dance number where we see Bill Robinson and this is understood to be the inspiration for what ended up being the Bojangles of Harlem dance number in the Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire film of Swing Time. So the Laserdisc is really great because it includes the excerpt of that particular film, Hooray for Love. Unfortunately, the Blu-ray does not include this excerpt, Hooray for Love. And so while we're getting a nice conversation about the minstrel aspect of that particular performance in the film Swing Time, we don't get the film excerpt that forms the actual basis for the dance number to begin with. So if you want to get a taste of that, you can get the film itself, Hooray for Love, but you can also take a look at the Swing Time Laserdisc special feature, or the special edition, and the CAV releases. And so you can try to check that out and see what the context is of that particular dance number. I think that's on the one hand, it's really great to see Swing Time upgraded from the prior incarnation as a Laserdisc to the current incarnation as a Blu-ray, with this particular emphasis on the trying to maintain a certain sense of, how should I put it, sensitivity with respect to how modern-day audiences might see this particular film. However, I would say that the Laserdisc does have a particular strong point in that it does include an excerpt of the film that ended up being the basis or the inspiration for the dance number to begin with. So it's quite a complex situation when it comes to this particular film and current day. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be in the Criterion collection. And so I am very pleased to see it here once again, and given the kind of attention that it, I think, really needs in order to provide one with at least the start, anyway, of a fuller and fairer appreciation of this film, which is Swing Time. Next is Spy number 97, and this is the Blu-ray of Do the Right Thing. Now, I should be very clear here. The DVD release of Do the Right Thing, as far as I recall, I could be wrong about this particular detail, but my understanding was that this was never out of print. This particular DVD had never been out of print. However, this is a different cover design. This is a slightly different presentation of the work. There are some supplements that are carried over, and there are some that are not quite the same. What we have is, in essence, a kind of re-emergence, if you will, of this film, and it is quite a glorious presentation of this quite landmark and incredibly influential film from the tail end of the 1980s. It's considered by many to be one of the most significant American films of the 1980s, and I think that reputation is one that I also agree with quite strongly. I would dare say it is probably one of the most important American films from the 1980s. And it is a contender for being one of the most important contemporary films of the latter half of the 20th century from the United States. And it is so because there is a kind of electric charge to this film that never lets up, and it just becomes, the intensity level increases and increases and increases until we reach boiling point. And I don't want to go into too much detail, but boiling point is, I think, both it is both palpable in the sense that we are talking about heat and the oppressive hot nature of the weather, and also we are talking about tensions that exist between human beings, and particularly tensions that exist within this particular New York neighborhood, and this is due to inherent feelings of either trust or mistrust. These are due to socially imposed norms, perhaps, and I say that, but I think it's much more complicated picture than what I'm trying to convey in these overly simplistic terms, and I apologize for them. This is to say that the film Do the Right Thing is a kind of powerful and unbelievably important work from American cinema, and it's certainly one of it's probably, in my mind, it still is Spike Lee's best work from my point of view, because it just gets it just right, and it knows how to reach balances in terms of its tones, and then knows how to tip the balances at just the right point in terms of its narrative thrust, which creates yet another temporal, or not temporal, but emotional imbalance that leads to some quite grand moments of kind of feeling and transcendental understanding. I think it's quite a remarkable film in that respect, and it still holds up incredibly well even now. So this is Do the Right Thing, and once again, Criterion did us a huge favor of giving us this release. Now, this has been available on other releases outside of Criterion. I know that. This has been available on the Criterion DVD. I know that as well. But there is something just quite lovely about seeing this particular cover design, the care and the care and the just the craft that goes into the presentation, not only of the cover design but also of the film itself, and just the life that this particular release seems to be giving this film, which is already filled with so much life and so much energy. But the Criterion really did us a favor this year, and so I am very pleased to see this film re-emerge, so to speak, once again in the Criterion collection. So this is my number 3, Do the Right Thing. Number 2, this is spy number 137. The film is Notorious. So Notorious had been an out-of-print DVD, which is right here, but now it has come back. Some of the supplements are the same, but not all. There are some different ones, some slightly new ones, which is really nice. But we do get a new 4K digital restoration here, which is a kind of glorious thing. The film is a towering achievement in Alfred Hitchcock's very long and renowned career, in my opinion. It is a film that is a contender for being, if it's not my favorite Hitchcock film, it's my second favorite Hitchcock film. I think my favorite Hitchcock film is Vertigo. That's one of my favorite films ever, in fact. But my second favorite Hitchcock film is oftentimes, I would say, is Notorious. And this is simply because it is the perfect mix of romance, sexual tension, suspense, a kind of analysis of parents and children relationships, fathers and daughters, mothers and sons. Also the kind of commentary, if you will, on marriages and couples and relationships, and this idea of the context of women in this particular society at this particular time in history. And this is, of course, brought to focus quite sharply and with great astute wisdom and quite biting commentary, if you will, in the form of the powerhouse performance by Ingrid Bergman as the character Alicia Huberman in this film. Her performance is one of the greatest performances I've ever had the pleasure of witnessing. And it is so because she is doing so many things at once within a particular moment of this film. It's like you can see the wheels moving. You can feel her thinking and trying to figure out what is going on in the particular situations that she finds herself in during the course of this film. And I love that about films. I love it when we can get characters who are thinking, and they are just they are shown to be putting things together. I love that. I love it. It shows a great deal of intelligence and wit, and also it is also a way of treating the audiences with a deal of respect, which I really appreciate. So, and not to mention the fact that the story is top-notch, thrilling from beginning to end. This is one of those films where I can watch it from beginning to end, and when it's over, I can go right back to the beginning and watch it again. I think I made a video once, something about films on a loop. This is one of those films I could definitely watch on a loop. I love this so much. Notorious. Criterion did us a great favor, not only of bringing this back from OOP state. Now it's back in full glory, but we also have some very helpful supplements to guide us, to aid us in our quest to further explore this film. And also we have, of course, the great presentation here with the lovely cover art, and there's a wonderful little bit here, the embrace between two particular people, and Ingrid Bergman, who's holding what looks to be a key. This is very important, very significant to the plot, and it's such an emblematic thing. This key is very important. So I love this. I just love this overall package and design. I love the fact that Criterion brought this back, and it brought it back with a kind of triumph and a vengeance that is nothing short of, I think, miraculous. So this is the great, great film Notorious. This is my number 2 pick for best upgrades. And with that, my friends, let me now show you my number 1 favorite upgrade in the Criterion Collection from 2019. This is spine number 995. The film is Polyester. Polyester is, how should I put it? When I was coming up with this list, I was having trouble putting together the order for most of the list from 5, 4, 3, 2. But, my friends, I had no difficulty at all choosing this for my number one favorite upgrade. This had been a Criterion Laserdisc way back in the day, and this was Laserdisc number 210. And look at that. This is really quite a great Laserdisc presentation. It was lovely, and it had a lot of great things about it. There were some bonus materials that was found at the end of the film itself. There was also the audio commentary. There are also the Odorama cards right here. So there was the whole package with this particular Laserdisc release from Criterion Collection, and it's one of my favorite Laserdisc releases from the Criterion Collection ever, in fact. Not to mention, of course, the fact that the film itself is one of those one-of-a-kind works of art that just does so many things at once. It horrifies, it really disgusts, it also provokes, and it also makes one think. It also makes one laugh, and it really fills my heart with joy. And I really mean that, because at its core, at its center, we have a real heart. And the heart is provided in the form of the great performance by Devine as the character Francine Fishpaw. Francine Fishpaw is a character that's found in a film of an American melodrama. This is something akin to, I don't know, it could be something akin to a Douglas Sirk film, except this is made by John Waters, who is one of the most, I think, brilliant American artists of his generation. And I really feel that way, because John Waters takes these sort of traditional conventions of societal norms and just puts them on their heads and just lets them fall and topple in a way that is in a way that he knows best. He does it with a kind of stinging, biting, almost devil-may-care attitude, which I find utterly refreshing and very insightful. And I say devil-may-care, but let me temper that a bit by saying he does it also with a kind of caring eye. You can tell that he cares about his characters, and he cares about the worlds that he is creating. And this world that he creates in Polyester is certainly a world that is filled with characters that are truly unique, sometimes quite baffling in what they do and what they say. But always there is a heart, there is a soul, and there is a purpose behind these things and these antics that are going on in this world. And as I say, my friends, at the center of this film is the truly dynamic and I would say very heartwarming, charming, and beautiful performance by Devine as Francine Fishpaw. This film, Polyester, I think has it all. It makes me laugh every time. It is sometimes just over-the-top ludicrous. It is sometimes just off-the-wall zany in terms of its level of sort of trying to quote-unquote offend, but it does so with a purpose and meaning that I think is very significant and makes the film therefore quite watchable and also very approachable. It is also a remarkable film in the sense that it does feel like a John Waters film that is a different type of film from the films that he was making in his earlier career, but it doesn't shy away from his earlier works completely, because there is still an edge, an undeniable edge to this work that makes this quite uniquely part of a kind of counterculture of cinema that maintains an intelligence and verve and wit that keeps this film alive and lively, and oh so lively is this film even now. So this is Polyester, my friends. Once again, this had been a Criterion Laserdisc, and it had been released on different formats outside of the Criterion collection on and off for however many years between the Laserdisc and now. But to see the film back in the Criterion collection in all of its beautifully grotesque glory is a sight to behold, and it is it makes me very happy whenever I see this film. And I've seen this film quite a number of times, and I love it every time. And I think it's one of those films where I just love it even more every time I see it. So to have it back in the Criterion collection is just one of the greatest things. And so I'm so thrilled that it's back. And for that reason, it is atop of this list, my favorite Criterion upgrade from 2019. Okay, my friends, so that's it for this particular list. What do you think? Again, these lists are subjective, and so I don't expect everyone to agree with every single thing all the time. I think the world would be a very boring place if we all agreed about everything all the time. And so I would love to hear what it is you have to say about this particular list, or more broadly, more generally, of course, I'd love to hear what your favorite titles were from this year. They can be Criterion Collection titles. They can be titles that are outside of the Criterion Collection. The sky is the limit, right? Because films are vast. Films are, of course, beyond the Criterion Collection. I happen to be talking about the Criterion Collection in these set of videos, but if you want to speak to me about some of your films outside of the Criterion Collection, as always, my friends, I am all ears, and I'd love to hear what it is you have to say. So I will continue with some more videos dealing with certain aspects of the Criterion Collection that I thought were particularly noteworthy in 2019. So I will continue with these videos as we slowly but surely approach the end of the year 2019. So until I see you in the next video, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. My dear friends, take good care of yourselves, and until we meet again, cheers.